they're too young to have ever run into Clippy.
Right. Go humanity. Resist, rebel, power to the people, all that. Welcome to the M-Dash Report, where media, marketing, and messaging meet the moment. He is not Arthur Baker. I am not Christopher Barger, but together we are them. Thank you for joining us. How's it going, CV?
It's going great, Arthur. Good to see you again, and I love the tie. You gotta tell it, because we're not normally a tie shop, and you're
we're not a tie
today.
shop. We're a one-button open, maybe sometimes two if you catch us at the right moment. Never a tie shop, but there's good reason today, and we'll talk about it for a bit. I want to give a special shout-out to our man behind the boards, our talented producer, Mr. Dan Roth.
I feel horribly underdressed as the only one in a hoodie, but and it's not even appropriate for our guest, but that's okay.
Dan, who are you wearing?
Yeah, I'm wearing Marmot.
CV, what's that jacket, Margell?
I am wearing Hagar, Hagar by men or men by Hagar, whatever it is.
That whole wardrobe conversation got me thinking about color choices. Today, I am wearing the school colors of my alma mater, Syracuse University. I was watching the NCAA tournament. Did any of you gentlemen watch the NCAA basketball tournament this last March? This March here?
I am a Michigan fan, so yes, I did.
Shout out to the UCLA women's basketball team.
Yes,
who won their first championship. But
in dominant fashion too.
But on the men's side, the maize and blue. There's an executive I worked with, and if you walk into her office, you will be overwhelmed by the tide of maize and blue. And don't call it yellow. Don't call it gold. Oh. Maize and blue. So congrats, Christine. Your team won. But it got me thinking about how much the places that shape us mold our preferences for certain things, like colors. Like, right. I never liked the color orange, but now you can't take it away from me. It's ingrained. Have you gentlemen experienced similar with your alma maters?
My alma mater is not good at anything but college hockey. So
mine either.
I went to Washington University. We play hockey. That's all we do. We stink at everything else.
At Fitchburg State, just a little further west, our best team was also the hockey team. But they were green and yellow, so green and gold. So I'm close.
Maize.
I'm a proud alum of Fitchburg State, actually. So
I promised that my color scheme had relevance. And we are very pleased, and I'm absolutely proud and honored to have as our guest today on the program the chair and professor of practice for the Public Relations Department at the SI Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University, Professor Anthony D'Angelo. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, Arthur. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Great to have you with the show. Thanks for taking the time.
I consider myself a product of the institution that you now help look after. Class of 96, Syracuse University, SI Newhouse School of Public Communications, and that's important. Oh, so CB, do you want to kick us off?
So, Professor D'Angelo, thank you so much for joining us. Let's get into the starting lineup. How did you get to where you are today? Let's get a little background on you and how you became the chair of this prestigious program.
I'd like to claim that I had a great strategic game plan for my career that brought me to this particular seat, but that would be a lie. So I did a 30-year internship in agency and corporate PR before I fled to the ivory tower. And it was a paying internship, which was fortunate. But like Arthur, I'm a Newhouse product. I have 2 degrees from here, so satisfied customer.
Love it.
And I started on the agency side for 8 years. Loved it. Thought I was an agency lifer. Got recruited by a corporation. Decided to make the leap. I would have to say I love that even more. I think I really enjoyed that segment of my career where I spent 20 plus years. And I started teaching as an adjunct, and I just fell in love with the classroom and started to think in very vague terms, maybe someday, you know? Mm-hmm. And then I found out about this interesting position here called professor of practice, where the Newhouse School likes to recruit people from industry to bring that perspective to the classroom. And I thought, that really sounds like me. So I joined here in 2015. I teach both grads and undergrads. I directed a master's program for a few years, and then later on became chair of the department. So I still teach in that master's program, but I've stepped back from directing it. And I have to say that this is probably the most personally rewarding stage of my career. Having been here 11 years now, it's inspiring to see students really grab a hold of the content and get engaged with the field and see them go on to their own careers. So I thoroughly enjoy it.
That must be absolutely amazing, because once upon a time you sat in the very literal seats of the young people you are now helping craft and guide.
Yeah.
What's that kind of full circle moment feel like for you?
It felt like coming home. So that was uplifting to me. I mean, for the last couple of weeks, we've been having on Mondays and Fridays what are called admitted student days. So the students who have been admitted are coming here with their parents, and they're hearing presentations from the dean and different departments and the faculty. So all the aspiring PR students meet with me for about an hour, and I give them a presentation about this is our curriculum. I love seeing the faces of these high school seniors and their anxious parents. And I literally remember visiting with my parents, sitting in the same seat and thinking, wow, this Newhouse place looks really cool. I think I want to go here. So it really is a full circle moment.
As an anxious parent myself, I can appreciate that moment.
Yeah.
It's got to be real energizing, though, to see the enthusiasm, to see them, the light bulb kind of going on over their heads and realizing I am about to get into something that is going to be good for me, rather than now I'm nervous about it. I imagine there's a piece that comes with seeing what the curriculum is and understanding that they're about to be placed in very good hands.
Yeah. I think that there is, Christopher. It's really what has been a learning for me, and believe me, I learn a lot, and I'm still a work in progress here. I still have imposter syndrome, having lived the life for so long, and now people are calling me professor. What? I knew that the students here would be smart, because Newhouse is a competitive place to get into, so that we get good quality students. So I expected them to be smart. What I was very pleasantly surprised by is how switched on they are. They're here because they want to be here. They're motivated. They want to get a job. They want to succeed. And they're not put off by challenges. They're actually energized by them. I mean, I bring in guest speakers, people like Arthur, for example, all the time, to speak. And, they're very candid. I mean, I had one agency CEO say, work-life balance? What? That you shouldn't be asking me that question. You should be asking, what are the strategic initiatives I can get most involved in? That's the right question. And students come up to me later and go, I appreciate the honesty, the candor.
Right.
They really do.
I was just going to ask if there's something that you learn from those students, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. Sometimes they have surprising nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah. So they are certainly digital natives, and so they bring a facility to all kinds of devices. I'm sure they can do things with my phone that I can't do, that kind of thing. Although I've worked hard at that. And, digital social media and generative AI and all that kind of stuff. I love the fresh perspective, and I love they consume information in a way that is different than somebody who grew up with the CBS Evening News consumes information. And I love hearing about that. Who are the influencers you follow? Why? What is it about them that attracts you? Do you know if the influencer's a human or a synthetic human, by the way?
That's a great question.
Not always.
Oh, my. One of the things that I hear as you talk about these interactions with students is how much things have changed. Can you tell us something you believed about this profession early on that is no longer true? To find a point on it. Something you used to know, and now it's not so anymore.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there are things that I don't know if they're absolutely untrue, but they're less true than they used to be. And one of them is that, when I was studying public relations here as an undergraduate, first of all, I learned how to write as a professional, which will serve you well. And by the way, is still fundamentally important.
Absolutely.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. And, so that's the case. That hasn't changed. As is the ability to think strategically, to bring a problem solution perspective to what you do. Those are kind of, no matter what the media are that we have to navigate, you still have to do those things. What's not so true anymore is it used to be that the implied third-party endorsement of a nice media placement, for example, does not necessarily mean that that's the most powerful channel to your audience. It might not be, although they're still very valuable, and nobody's a stronger proponent of the fourth estate than I am. It may be that it's an influencer who I really need to be reaching.
Right.
It may be a podcaster. It could be a community activist. And what's really different, the huge shift is there used to be the media, and then there were organizations of all types. Well, now every organization of just about every type is a media company. It has a channel. It has a website. It probably has a podcast. It probably has blogs. It produces videos.
Right.
And the import of that, and the fact that now any of us can communicate with all of us, I think that's like Gutenberg printing press level revelation. Now, that doesn't mean because you can communicate with all of us, it doesn't mean you're noticed. Right, that you should first, right, exactly right. It also doesn't mean you're noticed. It doesn't mean you're believed or all of that. You have to earn that, but it's possible. And that's been a sea change.
Right.
One of the things I think about is the growth of discernment that has to happen. And it's not so much a question, it's just things have changed so much. When we talk about those CBS days, there was a person who had to go through a certain program of life activities and learning to be in that chair, speaking to us at that moment.
Right.
Now anyone can turn on their phone, to the professor's point, and talk to everyone everywhere conceivably. It's
and the real change too is the, and Professor, you got to this, the implied authority of the person sitting in that chair has lessened. Right. Just because they're in that chair doesn't mean that they're any more valuable. The anchor of the CBS Evening News may be less influential than Joe Rogan right now. That's a very, very difficult mindset for those of us who grew up in the gatekeeping era.
Yes, that's so true. And it even gets weirder, when you think about generative AI, and I do think about generative AI just about every day, as I try to keep up with this bullet train that's like careening through our profession. We're at a day right now, and we have been for at least 3 years, where we literally can't believe our eyes and ears.
Right.
That's literally the case. So, if you buy into the fact that public relations is about building trust, ultimately that's the end game. Well, if we can't trust our eyes and ears, where are we going here? How do we build it? And I think the answer is with just relentless transparency and ethical standards. That's really what's going to happen. And even then, you might come under assault from, you could be deep faked.
Right.
A lot of the bedrock principles, I think, of reputation management and strategic communications have, remain. But I also think that the media environment that we have to navigate is so different. I mean, ChatGPT was born in November 2022, right? And look at the differences. I mean, you gentlemen definitely experienced that. And I saw a job listing for a prompt engineer not so long ago. It paid $350K a year.
Oh man,
Not too
That's
shabby.
a really, really good prompt.
What did you say? Can you send the link?
questioning my life
Right.
choices here.
But here's the thing, there are Newhouse professors that are much more into the data science and programming of generative AI than I am, and a couple of them will tell you, as they try to forecast into the future where it's going, we may reach a point not so far away where the platforms won't need anybody to
Right.
prompt them.
Actually, a great segue into like the next. So thinking about what's being taught now that
Yep.
we couldn't have imagined being taught 5 years ago. Like you talked a little bit about the advent of some of these things that have only come to fruition in 5 years' time. What kind of subject matter is being taught now that it wasn't on anyone's mind that it would have been relevant or something to be taught as early as 5 years ago?
I think some of the mechanics of machine learning, for example, and the characteristics of large language models and how to gain visibility with those LLMs is really important. And in fact, I think it's kind of an interesting irony that you want the LLMs to find you and your company or your client, depending on what sector you're working in. One of the best ways for you to raise your visibility with them are two things. One is good old-fashioned publicity.
Yeah.
And the other one is your owned media. How's your website? Right? And
Absolutely.
I don't know, I kind of find that refreshing. Oh, those things still work. They really do. And they help you with GEO, as it's called now.
Yeah.
It's changing so fast. I mean, here we are in April of 2026, and I can't believe how much better the platforms are now than they were at the start of the year.
Yeah.
Their capabilities. I mean, I go into ChatGPT now and it calls me Tony. Unprompted, and
Well, it does a better job than those of us who insist on continuing to call you professor.
Yeah, right.
Call me Tony.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
machine got the message.
Exactly.
You talked a little while ago about how the core principles of building trust, building reputation, relationship building still remain the sort of bedrock underneath, even with all the change we've had. Is there a piece of advice you were given at the beginning of your career that's still super relevant? What is that best core, this is how you do it, this is how our game is played, advice that you ever got? And is it still relevant in an era of all this change?
Yes. So I've been extraordinarily fortunate in my career to work for some outstanding leaders. And I wasn't necessarily the fastest person on the uptake, but I did have a certain sense for knowing who to watch and say, you know what, I want to be like her, or I want to be like that guy. I like the way they roll. And that has been enormously beneficial to my continual development. A couple of pieces of advice that I still hold are, as true and that benefited me is one is the primacy of ethics, I think, and Warren Buffett has said, and I think you gentlemen refer to this, I think his quote was, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, you'll conduct yourself differently. And I think that's true. And by the way, with due respect, I would quibble with Mr. Buffett on one point. I think in 2026, it takes less than 5 minutes to destroy it because everything's so instantaneous and global. The other piece of advice that I got that was a gold mine for me is that it's your job as an employee to figure out what the expectations are of you. And nobody is going to go draw you a roadmap for, this is what you got to do and how you have to do it. And I'm going to coach you along. to me, that's the biggest difference between the classroom, where we give assignments with detailed instructions and even rubrics for how we're going to evaluate you. And you get out in the workplace and it's just one damn thing after another, and nobody draws you a map, right? And so the guidance that I got was be inquisitive and determine as precisely as you can what the expectations are for you,
Right.
and then strive to exceed them just a little bit, but do it every day. And that to me has been, that was a revelation to me, because I think I was too passive when I was just starting out in the field, and kind of waiting to be led. And this idea of saying, no, it's my job to go get it. And then I can't emphasize this enough. If you exceed the expectations just a little bit, like if your boss asks for 5 things by Friday, give her 6 by Thursday, right? And make a habit of it. And what I have observed in so many different people who do that is they get sucked up the ladder faster than they can fathom.
The things that I learned that were most valuable wasn't really a content thing. It was a how to approach things.
Right.
And
Right.
it's really kind of cool and validating to know that that's still kind of the thing. You're teaching these young people how to approach, life and things and challenges they might come up against, because you can't predict it, especially not anymore. Things I walked into working through the financial crisis and through COVID and all that, I couldn't.
Right.
No one could have taught that to me.
It's amazing how nobody teaches you how to deal with the biggest challenges you're going to have in your career. You can fall back on the mindset that you learned. You can fall back on examples. But at the end of the day, when you run into that one or two things that are going to be the biggest challenge you'll ever run across, there's no playbook. You are relying on your ability to improvise.
It's not really an exaggeration to say that communications equals leadership. You can't lead without communications. You can't execute without communications. And a lot of our curriculum has gravitated more toward it, not that it wasn't there before, but I think we've taken a more intentional focus on teaching some of those leadership perspectives and skills that are really life skills when you think about it.
All right. Let's get into crunch time. This is our main topic.
I feel like we're already in crunch time.
We are in crunch time. All right. So the entry-level job used to be where new comms and marketing graduates cut their teeth, learned their craft, made the mistakes that they'd one day laugh about over a happy hour, and became the real professionals. Now, with the rise of AI, this could be changing. A recent Stanford study found that workers from 22 to 25 years of age have experienced a 13% decline in available jobs due to AI adoption. And that's across all industries, but in communications and marketing, it might even be higher because we rely so much on visuals and writing. Professor, are we still preparing students for jobs, or are we preparing them for careers or something bigger?
I get very mixed signals from the industry surveys that I read about where job destruction is happening and for what level of position and that sort of thing. But I do know and believe that, as in the Industrial Revolution, there is displacement that's going to happen. I mean, it just is. And so, if somebody, was working as a ditch digger, and they saw their only way to ply that trade as a shovel, you're going to lose your position to the person who learns how to operate a steam shovel. Right? That's the deal. And I think you can draw a rough analogy with you've got to learn to adapt the tools of today to what needs to happen within organizations to stay relevant. I'm sure we've all read a bunch of articles that say, over the course of your career, if you're 21 years old now, you can expect to have whatever it is, 8 jobs or something like that. Now, I read an article not so long ago that said you can expect to have 5 careers. What I think that means is a couple of things. One is I think we have to really focus on critical thinking skills. Can you evaluate the environment that you're in and say, this is what's needed? Also, part of that is sort of the leadership and management skills that we've talked about. Those are evergreen. And I think it always is going to demand a couple of things happen. One is I think we need a much higher level of media literacy so that you can interact, with these platforms and know, both as a recipient of communications and a producer of them, where you fit in that ecosystem. That's really, really important.
The number of careers thing was just blowing my mind. I was curious to know, Dan, what career are you on? CB, what career are you on? I'm probably on number 5.
At least
I think
three.
I think I'm sitting on 4, but about to enter number 5 with all the AI that we've talked about. I think that drives a whole new career.
Yeah, it does. And I think the focus has to be on continuous learning. I mean, the idea. I mean, I was naive enough when I was, got my bachelor's degree. Okay, I've been force-fed all this information. Look out, world, I'm ready. I don't need to learn anymore. I mean, I never said that, but that may have been an unspoken assumption,
Right.
and wow. By the way, in an ironic way, I think that also holds true for organizations, because you can get irrelevant as an organization really fast. And what that means for communications professional is, wow, do they need help? And I tell students, this idea, did you see what Cracker Barrel went through last year, for example? That's job security for you and me.
That brings up another one of our other questions. And I think I know how you're going to answer it based on what you just suggested. But in your opinion, what's closer to the truth? Is AI an opportunity for the communications and marketing profession, or is it a threat? And based on what I just heard you say, that's job security. It's an opportunity for it, right?
I am very cautiously and thoughtfully optimistic. I mean, I have some huge concerns about intellectual property, about deep fakes, about bad actors utilizing these tools. I mean, those threats are real, but I'm reminded that the Chinese character for crisis is there are 2 interlocking Chinese characters that mean crisis, and one of the characters is danger, and the other character is opportunity. And I think that's where we are.
We all are who we are now because once upon a time, someone hired us to not be as good as we are now at what we do. If entry-level work is disappearing as a function and a product of AI, how are we going to build mid-level talent, and who's going to run the shop one day? I mean, if the bottom rung disappears, how does anyone climb or actually learn the craft?
All professions, especially the public relations or strategic communications profession, needs to think much more intentionally and deliberately about how it's going to groom the next generation of talent. There isn't a traditional path anymore, right? It's so, there's a great line from Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, about careers, which was, it's not a ladder, it's a jungle gym. I was part of a really interesting executive education forum about 2 weeks ago that Newhouse sponsored with American Airlines. And it was about this question. We brought together about 60 people. Most of them were either CCOs or agency CEOs. And we had a young professionals group that talked about, here's what we need to grow and succeed. And that was fascinating. And then we heard from agency CEOs, including the CEO of an executive search firm, about identifying effective recruitment strategies to fill the talent pipeline. And the theme of that was the talent's there. We're not always doing a great job of identifying it and bringing it along. And that followed with CCOs on the corporate side talking about, the name of it was, who's advancing the next CCO? Who's taking responsibility for that, right? And bringing them along. And wow, I was furiously taking notes through this. And I really credit the CCO of American Airlines, a gentleman named Ron DeFeo, and the founder and principal of a consulting firm named Grayson Emmett Partners named Keith Burton. They recognize kind of a hole in what you typically get at a Page Society conference or a PRSA conference. You can meet those people, but it's usually, there's 600 other people in the room with you, and it's a presentation and that. This was much more focused and really candid. The woman who is the global head of communications for Citibank, her name is Jen Lowney. Somebody in the young professionals group was talking about hybrid workplaces and why they're important and work-life balance. And she very graciously, when it was her time to speak, she said, I have to gently disagree with that premise. I'm here to tell you that if you want my job, don't be thinking about how many days a week in the office, and it's work-life choices. It's not work-life balance that you ought to be thinking of. And I was sitting next to a student who happens to be a senior undergrad, and she leaned over and she said, I appreciate the candor.
Yeah.
Right? that this is the deal. Like, if you think you can weave this sort of Pollyanna tale about you can have it all and, this is the way it's going to be and, all that sort of stuff, when you actually get into the profession, no, it's a lot more demanding than that. And here's what you need to assume. And by the way, not everybody needs to be a CCO.
Right.
But if you aspire to that, you got to make choices based on those requirements.
To some of them, it must have been kind of a culture shock to hear that. So I'm interested to know, do the students and the people on the upcoming now, are they feeling anxious or are they feeling excited?
I would say, Arthur, for a number of reasons, and I'm giving you my own take based on anecdotal evidence that I have
Just
with talking with students.
Taking the pulse, yes.
Right. Yeah. But I meet with students every week about prospecting for jobs, landing internships, networking, and all that kind of stuff. And I would say there's a general feeling of anxiousness. And it's not just because of industry issues, but if you think about, the incredible social and political polarization in the larger environment. And oh, by the way, there's a war going on. And where's that going? And is this going to be weeks or something more? And, so yeah, it's not an exaggeration to say they're anxious. I can also say that some of them are landing jobs. I also try, with the benefit of my advanced years, say, look, recessions always happen and they always end. And they're like, okay, I get it.
From one anxious cohort to another, what do you say to somebody right now who's spent 20 years mastering the craft of public relations, now that AI is compressing that craft into literally matters of seconds in some cases? You talked about what you're telling people who are at the beginning of their career, but there are people who are still 10 years out, 15 years out from retirement, and everything is changing. What do you tell that group to keep them from feeling that same level of anxiety?
My advice to them would be, you can still be relevant. It's going to take some resetting of expectations and some continuous learning, but you can deliver a service to your employer or an organization by the benefits of your experiences if you bring them into the new media ecosystem that we're all trying to traverse right now. For those people who really truly think strategically, I mean, I was well over 50 when ChatGPT was introduced, right? And, I'm surprised at some of the products I've been able to produce, right? To look at it, with cold-eyed realism for a moment, I'm sure that the very best buggy whip company went out of business, and
No, I think I saw an advert from them.
Right?
I think they're still kicking.
Yeah. Now, by the way, if that company had defined their business as we're in the transport acceleration business, they might have had a very different future. For those who can adapt, continuously learn, I think the opportunities are huge. I really do.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. It's a great answer.
I'll check with my partners. Are we time checking?
It is time, my friend.
This is a segment of the program we'd like to call buzzer beaters. It's our own kind of round robin rapid fire of things industry related and some not.
All right.
Okay, first item. Career advice has not kept up with AI. As a result, workers are navigating careers with outdated playbooks, built for probably more stable jobs and more linear career paths. What needs to change first? CB, why don't we start with you?
The first thing that needs to change, I think, is recognizing that the new career currency isn't your title, it's your learning velocity. How fast can you learn? How fast can you close the gap between what you know and what you need to know? That becomes a lot more important than just figuring out, like you said, that there's this ladder that I follow and it's going to be a linear process. You're going to have 5 or 6 different careers. You're going to change something every 3 or 4 years. The speed at which you adjust is really key to your career at this point.
Dan, you have any thoughts on that?
One of the things that I pick up on is a lot of it feels like it's a personal responsibility. The advice kind of reminds me of the advice about recycling and how the industry turned it around on the individual to make it your responsibility to make sure that things get recycled. And some of that is true, but we have always been lifelong learners. I think at least those of us who succeed. So I love that that's getting a fine point put on it now, because that is just the way you stay relevant and the way you stay interested and curious. If I could give anybody advice, build a strong network, say yes to things, and you will do both. You will have colleagues and contacts that will help you succeed, and you will constantly learn because you're saying yes.
Professor, your take?
I really can't say it any better than Christopher did as far as, what really matters in terms of advice and what Dan said about networking. I mean, a colleague of mine always says your network is your net worth. And I think that's absolutely true. I mean, the Census Bureau says there's about 250,000 PR people in the United States working professionally. I swear we all know each other.
You
right?
probably do. There's one big conference every year, right?
Yeah, it seems that way.
It's very, very true. My take, progress doesn't adapt to people. People adapt to progress. I don't know who's writing the playbooks or if they can even be written fast enough, but humanity and human endeavor should be the point. They have to find a way to survive because we ultimately are the point, or we should be. I hope whoever's writing that playbook figures things out, or we figure things out collectively amongst our networks, because this train doesn't seem to be slowing down for any of us to catch up. Well, CB, next item up for bid.
Blue Sky just attempted to introduce an AI app to help users customize their feed. And that bot quickly became the most blocked bot and most blocked account on Blue Sky. Professor, I'd love to start with you. Do you think this is a symptom of AI fatigue, or if it was more just bad execution?
I wonder if it is the AI wariness over the access that they have to our data and our personal information. And you know what? I've had it about up to here with that. I'm tired of apps asking if they can view my other apps and all that sort of thing. And I wondered if that's some of what Blue Sky ran up
Everything
against.
needs to access your video, your camera.
Right.
I'm like, why? You're a calendar app. Why do you need access to my camera?
Oh, yeah.
Go humanity. Resist, rebel, power to the people, all that. At some point, I think there has to be a backlash against AI and bots being shoved down our throats at every turn. It's getting a little obnoxious. I mean, the pendulum is swinging too far in one direction, and eventually it has to swing back. My favorite commercial right now is from PwC. They have this commercial where there's a guy giving a presentation. He's like, AI, 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 AI. People at a cocktail party, AI, 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 AI. That's what things have become. Like, there's a lot of noise and hype, and I can't help but feel it's a little overdone. It reminds me of like the whole Y2K industry at the turn of the century or the dot-com era.
Right.
Just put
Yeah.
.com at the end, and you'll just make $1 billion.
Having lived through the .com era and been at the beginning of my career during the .com era, there is that pendulum that swings back the other way. But even so, things will have irrevocably changed after that pendulum swing. .com, there was certainly overblown hype. There was certainly a lot of false business models.
Yeah.
But even when the pendulum swung back the other way, there's still a before and after. There's still everything is now online versus nothing was online.
Right.
And I think that's going to be the case with AI. I agree with you that the pendulum is swinging back and people are getting a little bit tired of constantly being AI being talked about. But there's still going to be a before AI and after AI, and we have to adjust to that, I think.
That's fair, CB.
Yeah.
But drugs.com did not put JohnsonandJohnson.com out of business. Okay, I remember the days where it's like if you just put a .com on the end of whatever, you're gonna beat the pants of all the established players.
Chewy proved you could do what Pets.com started off with a great ad and no actual business. Right. To try. But, I get the sense with this Blue Sky example that these people are ignoring or completely unaware of the practice of user experience. And maybe they're too young to have ever run into Clippy in Microsoft Word or, the idea of helpers is you have to make them helpful and not interruptions. And I think, an interrupter is another term for like a circuit breaker. And what does that do? It shuts off the electricity. It stops your neurons from firing, right? When it gets in the way. And this seems like just bad execution.
LinkedIn, one of my favorite places to play, has announced that it is tightening and limiting access to who can go live on their platform. Smart quality control or quietly killing human spontaneity. Dan, we'll start with you.
I don't disagree with the push to schedule and promote. I think it's a good practice if you're doing it as a creator on LinkedIn. I think it's also probably good for LinkedIn to manage the demand and not incur huge bandwidth cost or crash their platform. It does make my spidey sense tingle if they're letting creators get a little bit more established before they start to evolve it into a paid only thing or start to crank that up. And that's just because I read Cory Doctorow's book. And it makes me think that everybody's doing it.
I agree with Dan on that. I think I have a friend of mine who writes really funny, very short LinkedIn posts with just random observations that he makes. And one that he made about LinkedIn itself was, when did LinkedIn become what I did on my summer vacation? It's a fair question. I think LinkedIn is okay to put some guardrails around its brand and what it's there to do.
I completely agree. I don't think this is just a logistical tweak. It's a signal about what kind of platform LinkedIn wants to be. It wants to be a little bit more polished, a little bit more controlled. And if the question is whether professional and spontaneous can coexist, I think LinkedIn has sort of very silently but very clearly indicated what side of that debate it wants to be on.
From a pure risk perspective, I can't argue with this one. And I'll take this a slightly different direction. We've already seen noted instances of terrible things happening or being done on live streams. And as a responsible company, I don't think LinkedIn wants to enable or encourage that. And by the same token, though, picking and choosing who deserves to be able to conduct a live, I think that if they start to go in that direction, that'll be a little restrictive because then you start to go into the territory of X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, where they've been accused, and rightly so, I think, of silencing specific voices based on either the algorithm or the preferences of the people who run the platform. And that starts to smack of something not okay.
Great point. All right, I'm looking forward to this one. Next on the buzzer beaters, according to the Institute for Public Relations, CEOs are increasingly choosing to go radio silent on big topics like purpose and values, where even just a couple of years ago they were not. Is this a smart move or a missed opportunity? Arthur, what's your take?
Personally, I think it's a shame. Having a vision for the world and being about something has always been part of the top job. I had the privilege to work at MasterCard when Ajay Banga was CEO, and he was about more than swipes and transactions, and he made sure that the company was seen as being about more sustainability, equitable access to the financial system, and making payments safer for people. I mean, even when you're not on the popular side of the conversation. So we were talking about the work-life choices. When Jamie Dimon said, everybody back into the office 5 days a week, let's go. Do I agree with his stance? Not particularly, but I respect him as the CEO for making it known. And I feel that's part of the job. I think what we're increasingly seeing is a wave of leaders who are afraid to make a decision and even more afraid to own their own decision. They're afraid to say boo because somebody might jump. This is not the way.
Professor D'Angelo.
Yeah.
I know you had thoughts.
There's definitely been a cooling effect on corporate purpose statements over the last couple of years. Some organizations had a tendency to feel obligated to make a statement on every political or social issue. And what happens from a communications standpoint is you're playing whack-a-mole.
Right.
And you could still ask, so if you're silent on those issues, people could legitimately ask, what do you stand for? And if you're forever spouting off about every issue, people can still ask, what do you stand for? I think it's really important for organizations to decide a few things. What issues are actually of relevance to my business, my employees, my customers? So I actually have a right to take a stand, right? A relevant one. I think that's really important. And a consultant that I know runs an agency called Reputation Architects. His name is John Goldberg. He always asks, and I think this is a great question for those organizations that want to weigh in on something. What's your motivation?
Right.
It's really important. Are you jumping on a bandwagon for visibility? Or do you actually, if you're jumping on, let's say, the immigration issue and what ICE has been doing and those controversies, do you feel like making a statement makes a difference? Or would you rather actually do something like host public forums and discussion groups or contribute to a cause or something like that? It's really more about the actions that you're taking, and you can describe those. It's not just, just making a statement. I mean, I didn't think that the 60 CEOs in the Minneapolis market that made a statement about ICE, I didn't see the value of that at all.
I didn't either. It said nothing. And that's the danger you run into, is saying something for the sake of saying something,
right?
And not really saying anything.
Yeah.
I will say that if you are going to, as a CEO, as a leader, tell your shareholders, tell your customers, tell your employees that you have a certain set of values and a certain set of conditions or things that you operate under, and then you stay silent when there's an opportunity to speak up because you're afraid of who's going to be upset.
Right.
That disconnect between what you say and what you do are going to cost you the trust that we all know is so important for the communications and public relations profession and for business in general. I understand the instinct to pull back, especially as the climate has changed over the last couple of years, but I think that consistency is what every audience that you're looking at is looking for. Arthur, bring us to the next one, buddy.
All right. So according to a study by the Conference Board, comms teams seem to be losing perceived influence with their CEOs. Why now? Professor, why don't we start with you?
I've seen some studies that indicate otherwise. My own perception is that it's very mixed out there, and that there are a number of communicators who have, in fact, ascended in status because they're actually thinking as business strategists. They're not thinking as communications people. And I think that the people who do that, who make that mindset sort of shift, can earn a very nice living.
No, nothing more to be said. I think you handled that one perfect. Thank you, Professor. Our last business-oriented one of the day. Kit Kat was just falsely accused of having more than 413,000 of its chocolate bars stolen in a truck in Europe, and they were accused of having engineered the whole thing as a PR stunt. Has viral marketing finally backfired? Have audiences just stopped believing everything that they hear from big brands? Dan?
Who remembers New Coke?
I remember New Coke.
I remember New Coke.
So they spent 3 months trying to make it work, and then they didn't. They gave up, and they introduced Coca-Cola Classic, which was supposedly the old formula. And when they did that, they said there are some who will say that we engineered the whole thing to make Coca-Cola sales better, because actually the New Coke incident, everybody spins it as a failure. Turns out it was a success. It really cemented Coca-Cola as a go-to. Pepsi had been really eating their lunch for a while, especially through the 70s. So when they got that accusation, their response to it was, we're not that dumb and we're not that smart. And I think that really is a perfect way to encapsulate it here. I think it's exactly the same thing.
Professor, your thoughts?
I give Kit Kat really good grades, to use a professor analogy, for the tone with which they addressed this whole flap. Really great wry humor that they injected into it. Other brands weighed in on the situation with the same dry humor, and I think that's why it took off.
Right.
I don't think 400,000 some Kit Kat bars is fortunately, I mean, although it's not a pleasant development, it's not a nuclear meltdown either, right? And they were sort of self-aware enough,
Professor.
right? And they used the exact number too. Yeah, they used the exact number too, which I thought was brilliant, right? And they were very agile in striking that tone, and I think that's why it resonated. As far as viral moments, I mean, I used to literally shudder when a client would say, "I want something to go viral."
Mm-hmm.
My gosh.
Yeah, usually you don't. Trust me. Usually you don't.
Right. So that's not the goal to start with, right? Yeah. It's if something goes viral, what do you do with it?
Right.
And I thought
Absolutely.
Kit Kat was agile and self-aware and got some benefit from that.
So I think audiences have been getting more skeptical, and rightly so. I mean, long before AI and deepfakes. I think the better we've become as a society at marketing, the more keenly aware people are and have become that they're being marketed to. And when they're being marketed to, and understanding you're being marketed to all the time. So as a result, we play this kind of cat and mouse game with people's attention. And the more mature the audience gets, the trickier the tricks get. So it becomes Chicken Little, or, the little boy who cried wolf. Chicken Little said his piece, the sky ain't fall yet. And the little boy, you cry wolf enough, when the wolf really shows up, no one's going to respond to your cries. So be reserved about how you use that.
Let's go with one more, at least, though. With Artemis 2 taking us back to the moon, or at least circling it for the first time in 50 years, number one, is the country ready to be excited by space exploration again? And number two, for all of us as PR experts, what does NASA need to get right this time from a PR standpoint? I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on that. Arthur, let's start with you.
So my 12-year-old daughter was avidly watching the Artemis launch on her phone. And first of all, it educated me because I wasn't even fully tuned in. There's so many other things going on. I wasn't tuned into it like that. But she was actively excited. And I think people, especially in this country, are ready to be excited about something, like anything. And if I were advising NASA, I'd say, don't overlook that fact. Humanize the accomplishment. Bring it to the younger generations who didn't see or have space as a big deal as we did, and build from there, because there is a gap. There's a whole swath of time where there wasn't much activity in the space program, not notable to the extent that it was back in the moon landing and then Challenger, unfortunately, and other things. It was just, we were Star Trek, Star Wars, and every other kind of stuff. It was a different time. So re-energize the base around it, I would say.
Professor, your thoughts?
I think people are ready, as Arthur said, for some inspiration, that this amazing accomplishment, people traveling further from Earth than has ever been achieved, is really cool. I think that what NASA needs to get right this time, I've been a space geek for a long time, being really purposeful about the value of this exploration so that it gets funded. I think people need to know, where is this all going? Richard Nixon cut the Apollo program after there were other Apollo missions that were going to happen after Apollo 17. That just stopped. And I heard interviews with NASA employees and astronauts from the Apollo era over the last week, just saying how heartbreaking that was. And I think NASA's got to think carefully about how do we avoid that this time? Because there's always an argument that, hey, shouldn't we be spending some of that money from up there down here?
Right.
Legitimate point. So they have to be thinking about strategically communicating about that to show what the value is.
Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I've been heartened to see that a lot of the celebration is what people are capable of. That's the great part. Everybody says, it blew my mind that people could go there. And since we got to the moon and since Apollo 13, it kind of, people got a little bored with it maybe, and they haven't promoted space exploration quite the same way. And like you talked about, Professor, the benefit of it. What do we get here for it? Well, this space exploration will give us energy efficient tech that we can use here on Earth because of the things that we learn by going to space, where there is no plan B, right? So we can use this. I mean, we got Velcro and all kinds of interesting things out of the first space program. But if it's going to be, well, we're going to get AI data centers in space and mining minerals on the moon, that's a little bit of a harder sell. Right. So, but the pictures have been amazing. I would love to see more of that. I would love to hear more about the stories from the people who went and did it, because that's the part that's great.
I love that you brought up the people. That's the one thing I think NASA can really do. We've had amazing technological accomplishments in the last few years. The Pluto flyby, the Mars rover, and all the things. We've had those technology jumps, but this is the first time that people have been involved. And I think humanity gravitates toward those people stories. If I'm NASA, I'm going to be telling the individual stories of the astronauts that are involved. I'm going to be telling the stories about the engineers who are making the whole mission possible. I'm going to be talking about the people at Mission Control. I'm telling those human stories because that is what defines the Artemis mission more than any of the other technological accomplishments of the last 20 years. It's that people are involved. And I think that's the one thing I would be advising them to emphasize.
One of the things that I had heard about the original moon landing was that every person who worked at NASA, whether you were cutting the grass, whether you were a nuclear physicist, whatever you were, what is your mission? We're going to put a human being on the moon. And everyone was unified in that purpose. And that is the gold mine for those kind of human stories that need to be told around this one. So who's up for some football or soccer, as we call it here, and the rest of the world does not? World Cup 2026 is now set. Who's winning it? I'm going to start with the shark in the tank, CB.
I'm the wrong person to ask about this because both of my teams failed to qualify. I'm an Italy and an Ireland fan, and both of them aren't there. My head wants to say France. They've got the deepest roster. They've got the emotional pull of Didier Deschamps' last go around. My heart would like to say England, just to have it come home after 60 years. Okay. Professor, are you a football fan?
I have no right to even comment on this question. I'm ignorant.
I don't know.
I don't either. But I went to a website and looked for the underdogs, and so I would like to see.
That's our crack research team there. Good, well done. Yeah.
So it sounds like it would be cool if Senegal, Uruguay, or Mexico won, or at least advanced pretty far. They're supposedly all very entertaining to watch because of their strategies, and maybe because now I did this, I will watch those matches.
Arthur, who you got?
I too am not a soccer person. The closest to it I ever got when I worked at Deutsche Bank, the one time of year when you didn't just see financial stuff across those screens was during World Cup. Every screen in every break room, everywhere, it was usually CNBC, you're seeing World Cup. And that was just cool to see that global energy around something. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, the betting favorite this time is Spain. And I'm not a betting person. This segment is not brought to you by any sports book of any kind. But anytime I hear the names Argentina and Brazil, I think World Cup. So that just automatically, there's a bias there that makes me think, they got a great shot. Home field advantage belongs to the U.S. Right. I mean, that's got to count for something. So the U.S. has to, potentially be a problem. But if I had to go my dark horse, I'm going Senegal with Dan, Ecuador, or Ghana. Fight me.
Ghana's good.
I am
Ghana's
putting
good.
my stake in the football turf. On behalf of the entire crew, we want to thank Professor D'Angelo for being an incredible guest. And what a great and vibrant conversation. I feel energized.
Thank you for inviting me. It's truly been a pleasure.
For the rest of you, thank you for joining us. Keep dashing.